Honestly, Eleanor, you've had your time here. Sam is gone. It's time you packed your things and gave us some space. This was never really your home anyway. That was what Jessica said to me, right after she passed the gravy. No hug. No, how are you holding up? Not even a polite nod. Just that served warm with mashed potatoes and green beans. Nathan didn't look up. He sat quietly at the head of the table where Sam used to sit. His fork moved in slow, meaningless circles around his plate. He hadn't touched the food I spent all morning preparing: a roast chicken, sweet carrots, sourdough rolls, just the way Sam liked them. Even in grief, I had tried to hold on to something familiar. But the air in the dining room was different now. It had been just a week since the funeral. 1 week since they lowered the only man I had ever loved into the cold Carolina ground, and already I was being erased like pencil marks under a wet thumb. You shouldn't be alone in a house this size. Jessica continued, her voice clipped, efficient. It's not good for someone your age. Someone your age. The phrase hung there sour and impersonal. I looked at the mahogany table, the same one where Sam carved the Thanksgiving turkey every year, where Nathan had once spilled orange juice while giggling through a knock-knock joke. Now all I could see was a woman sitting across from me who had never once called me Mom. It's not safe, Mom, Nathan mumbled, finally glancing up. You could fall. Stairs, slippery tiles. I mean, you're 68. 68 is not ancient, I said, keeping my tone measured. He shrugged. It's just not practical. Jess and I have been looking into options. There's a senior condo community over in Arden. Peaceful, nice views close to a hospital. I blinked. You've been looking? Jessica set down her fork with a little clink. Of course. We knew you'd need help making decisions. The house is too much for you now. Too much. The same house I had scrubbed, repaired, and cared for across 3 decades. The same floors I had mopped while 9 months pregnant. The same windows I had watched Sam through as he mowed the lawn in his faded baseball cap. I steadied my hands beneath the table. This is my home. Nathan leaned forward slightly. It was Dad's house, Mom. His name is still on everything, and you know he wanted what's best for you. We're just trying to carry that out. I turned to him sharply. Sam would never. Sam isn't here. Jessica cut in smooth as silk. And we are. She smiled, not warmly, but in that smug way someone does when they've already won the argument in their head. I'd seen that smile before. She wore it at our first Thanksgiving together when she insisted on quinoa stuffing and turned her nose up at my cornbread. I swallowed. So you're saying I should leave? Jessica tilted her head, voice saccharine. We're saying we're concerned about your well-being. You need companionship, activities, people your age, and this house, I asked. Well, she said, glancing around, we'd renovate. Open up the floor plan, get rid of those heavy curtains, paint the walls something brighter. It has potential. Potential, I echoed. Like an old building on the verge of demolition. Nathan shifted in his seat. Jess and I are talking about starting a family. The extra rooms would help. The school district is great here. My stomach turned. You want this house? He said nothing. He didn't have to. Jessica reached for her water glass. You'll be so much happier in Arden. They have a garden club. I heard they do karaoke nights on Wednesdays. Karaoke. As if I could sing away the grief still pressing against my ribs. I looked down at my plate, the steam gone now. I hadn't eaten a bite. My voice came out low, measured. I'm still mourning my husband. You can mourn anywhere, Jessica said brightly. And honestly, the sooner you start packing, the better. There's a 2-bedroom opening up at Willow Pines, and the realtor said it'll go fast. The audacity took my breath away. I turned to Nathan. You think 2 weeks is enough time to leave my entire life behind? He hesitated. We thought it would be fair. Gives you time to sort things. We could help arrange movers. I laughed bitter. That's generous of you. Jessica's eyes flashed. We're trying to make this transition smooth, Eleanor. No one wants drama. Drama. As if being evicted by your only child a week after burying your husband was something best done quietly, like slipping out of a party without saying goodbye. I stood up slowly. The chair made a small scraping sound across the tile. For a moment, I wavered lightheaded. This was never really your home anyway. That line stuck, harder than the rest. Not really my home. Not after 34 years. Not after Sam and I picked out every light fixture, patched every crack, shared every birthday, every storm, every bill. Not after raising Nathan here, bandaging scraped knees in that same kitchen, teaching him to ride a bike down the gravel driveway, Sam paved by hand. I walked away from the table and up the stairs. My legs trembled by the fourth step. By the seventh, I stopped looking back. Our bedroom. My bedroom now still smelled faintly of cedar and the cologne Sam used. His slippers were tucked beneath the bed. His book still sat open on the nightstand, a business card marking page 122. I sat down carefully, ran my fingers along the comforter, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The conversation. The way Jessica had taken control. The way Nathan hadn't defended me not once. It wasn't a shock I felt. Not entirely. It was the weight of recognition, of knowing this wasn't sudden, that this had been building silently, slowly for years. Jessica had always resented my presence, that much was clear. But Sam had buffered it, balanced the energies in the room with his warmth, his patience. Now he was gone, and she saw her opening. And Nathan, my boy, had let her walk through it. I turned to the closet and reached for the small fireproof safe Sam kept on the top shelf. He always said it was for just in case. I never pressed. Sam handled the paperwork. I trusted him. But that night, with my heart bruised and my dignity hanging by a thread, I pulled it down. Inside was a folder, cream-colored, worn at the edges, labeled simply, "In case of anything," in Sam's careful handwriting. I sat with it on my lap for a long time. The wind rattled the windows. A truck passed outside. The weight of the folder was unfamiliar, heavy, in a way that suggested there was more in it than insurance papers or utility bills. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I whispered to the dark. "You saw this coming, didn't you, Sam?" Because somewhere deep down I knew. He had always been the quiet one. But not blind. Never blind. He saw how they treated me when I wasn't looking. He saw how Jessica rolled her eyes. How Nathan forgot birthdays. How they skipped anniversaries, made excuses, called less and less. And so he prepared. For something. Maybe not this, but something. Tomorrow I will open the folder. Tomorrow I will go to the bank. Tomorrow I would find out whether the woman they were trying to erase had already been written into a far more powerful chapter. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on Sam's side of the bed, staring at the faint outline of the ceiling fan overhead, listening to the silence fill every crack in the walls. It used to be a comforting silence, the kind that came with familiarity, with knowing exactly who slept beside you. But now it felt like something else. Hollow. Watching. I reached for the folder again. In case of anything. How long had it been there, sitting quietly while life happened around it? Through birthdays, holidays, long weekends, through all the times I thought we had more time. I turned on the bedside lamp, warm and yellow, just enough light to make things feel real. The folder creaked open with a papery sigh. On top was a letter, in Sam's handwriting. "Eleanor," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry I had to leave things this way. You always said I worried too much, but you also always knew I paid attention. And I've seen things that didn't sit right. I don't want to go into details here. But just know I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, you'd never be left helpless." My hand trembled as I turned the page. Beneath it were documents neatly labeled and dated. Bank account numbers, trust paperwork, photocopies of signed forms, password hints, names of contacts, and a note. "Start with the First Citizens Branch on Waverly. Ask for Marjorie Klein. She knows everything." I placed the letter gently back into the folder, feeling the weight of Sam's planning settle on my shoulders like a second skin. It was almost 6 a.m. when I finally got out of bed. I showered slowly, deliberately. I pressed the navy dress Sam had once called my boardroom armor and added the silver brooch I wore on our anniversary. If I were going to begin this quietly, I would do it on my terms. By 8:15 a.m., I was sitting in the parking lot of First Citizens Bank, watching early commuters shuffle into the bakery across the street. I didn't want to seem fragile even if I felt like a glass teacup wrapped in newspaper, old, chipped, easily discarded. Inside the bank smelled like furniture polish and printer ink. Clean, controlled, everything Jessica wasn't. A young teller smiled politely, but when I asked for Marjorie Klein, her smile straightened just slightly. She picked up the phone, whispered something, and then pointed me toward the back. Marjorie was a tall woman with silver hair swept into a no-nonsense bun and horn-rimmed glasses that made her look like she'd walked out of a black-and-white film. "Mrs. Reed," she said, standing to shake my hand with both of hers. "I've been expecting you." That line nearly made my knees give out. I thought maybe Sam had hoped I'd come, but expecting. She motioned for me to sit. Samuel was very thorough. We met once every 6 months like clockwork. He kept impeccable records, and he made sure everything was set up in the event of, well, anything. I didn't even know he had accounts here, I admitted. "You're not the first spouse to say that," she said kindly. "But Mr. Reed wasn't hiding anything from you. He was protecting you." She typed something into her terminal, and I could see her expression shift slightly as she reviewed the accounts. "We'll go through everything together," she said. "It may take a little time." "I have nothing but time," I replied. "Apparently." She printed a series of documents, the first being a joint checking account. Modest, but enough to carry me for several months without worry. My heart loosened slightly. It felt like Sam reaching out from beyond, telling me, "You're not alone in this." Next, Marjorie said, "There's a savings account. Still joint, but you're now the sole holder." She passed the sheet across the desk. The number made me blink. Enough to live on for years. Not luxury, but freedom. "There's more," she added. My eyes lifted. "There are 3 additional accounts, 2 CDs, and 1 money market, all in your name only." I frowned. That can't be right. Sam never... He never even had me sign anything. Marjorie smiled faintly and opened a drawer. Out came a folder thick with paperwork. "Oh, he had you sign. Here and here." She tapped 2 highlighted signatures. "Looks like he brought you in during your anniversary trip. Maybe told you it was for a change in mortgage terms or insurance." I stared. I remembered that day. We had brunch at the little place on Main Street, and he said we needed to swing by the bank real quick. I had signed while talking about getting a new patio umbrella, and all this time he had been preparing for the storm. I leaned back in the chair, letting the numbers and pages blur for a moment. I wasn't broke. I wasn't dependent. I wasn't disposable. "There's one more thing," Marjorie said, lowering her voice. She pulled out a stapled stack of trust documents. "5 years ago, Mr. Reed established what's known as the Waverly Asset Trust. You are the sole beneficiary." She let that sink in. I didn't fully understand. "What's in the trust?" I asked. Marjorie clicked through her computer. "Primarily the equity from a holding company. It's listed as Reed and Associates, a limited construction firm, but it's been steadily profitable. The proceeds have been routed monthly to this trust." Quietly. Sam didn't want it to be a flashy account. Reed and Associates. That was Sam's old company. He'd retired 5 years ago, sold the assets, and said it barely broke even. Only, he hadn't. Marjorie turned her screen. A stream of deposits scrolled downward. Monthly. Predictable. Increasing. My pulse quickened. I thought he sold the company. Not sold. Reorganized. He retained silent ownership through a holding trust. Operated under the radar. Most of our clients who do this are trying to avoid family tensions. I closed my eyes. He knew. He saw this coming. Jessica and Nathan standing in my dining room, mapping out paint colors, rearranging the living room in their minds. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was just a grieving old woman with a house and no options. They thought wrong. I left the bank with a manila envelope in my purse and a new name in my phone, Margot Thorne, financial attorney. Back at the house, the silence felt different. It wasn't haunting now. It was listening. I walked through the hallway slowly, my hand tracing the wainscoting Sam had refinished one summer. I passed by the shelf Nathan built in high school shop class, still crooked. I paused in front of the linen closet, imagining the stacks of towels I'd soon box up, not out of defeat, but out of decision. The phone rang. Jessica. I didn't pick up. I let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, it buzzed again, a text this time. The realtor is available this Friday to photograph the house. Please tidy up. Photograph the house. Not even your house. Not even a check-in to see how I was doing after her dinner table ambush. I placed the phone face down. My hand hovered over the envelope in my purse. I pulled out the trust documents, spreading them carefully across the dining table like a tarot spread. And then I saw it, a line that made me inhale sharply. Trustee retains the right to maintain or appoint operational leadership of all holdings, including Reed and Associates, meaning I wasn't just a beneficiary, I had authority, power, and that meant I had a choice. The next morning, I called the accountant Sam had used for over a decade. His name had been scrawled in the margin of one of the pages, Douglas Marsh, CPA. He answered on the second ring. Reed family, you must be Eleanor. Sam left your name, I said. He said you'd know what to do. There was a long pause. Yes, ma'am, I would. Mr. Douglas Marsh looked exactly like the kind of man Sam would have trusted with money. Neatly parted gray hair, pressed shirt, and an old-fashioned tie with faint coffee stains he probably didn't notice anymore. His office was tucked behind a row of insurance agencies and a dentist's clinic, modest, unassuming, like everything about Sam's financial life had always been. You brought the documents, he asked gently as he motioned for me to sit. I nodded and handed over the folder Sam had left behind, the one I'd reread 3 times last night, under the kitchen light while the whole house slept like something preparing for an ending. Douglas adjusted his glasses, skimmed the first few pages, and then smiled, not at me, but at the structure of it all. He did it, he murmured. Your husband was a brilliant man, quiet but sharp, and fiercely protective. I clasped my hands together to hide the trembling. He never told me anything. Not directly. Not even that he kept the company. He had his reasons, Douglas replied, flipping to the next section. Let me guess, family dynamics. I gave a short, bitter laugh. That's one way to put it. He nodded knowingly. It's more common than you think. We see it a lot. Adult children growing entitled spouses pretending to care until the estate hits probate, and widows left with more questions than answers. Sam wanted none of that for you. I leaned in. What exactly do I have? Douglas tapped the document. Technically, you're the majority owner of a private LLC that still operates under the Reed and Associates umbrella. It brings in steady income through mid-sized residential renovation projects and commercial maintenance contracts. It's not flashy, but it's efficient. And Nathan doesn't know. He was never listed as a stakeholder, Douglas confirmed. Sam made that decision years ago. He wanted you to have control without interference. I exhaled slowly. And if I wanted to keep it that way? Douglas smiled. Then I'd say you're already doing everything right. He pushed over a summary the company had brought in over $300,000 in net revenue last year. The margins were healthy. The client is loyal. The project manager, someone named Aaron McIntyre, had glowing notes from Sam in the margin, sharp, honest, dependable. You could liquidate the company, of course, Douglas said. Sell off assets. But Sam structured it to be a long-term source of income. If you wanted to continue operations, it's ready for you. Or you could appoint someone, Erin perhaps, and let her run it with full autonomy. I nodded slowly. I want to keep it running. Douglas's smile deepened. Good. It's what Sam would have wanted. He closed the folder gently. Now, about your son. I stiffened. Douglas leaned forward, lowering his voice. Over the past 5 years, Sam approved several personal loans from the business account, approximately $20,000 the first year, then more over time. Altogether, we're looking at close to $95,000. I stared. 95? He nodded. And almost no repayment. Sam didn't press it, but he documented everything down to the day, including missed payments and interest accrual. If you wanted, those documents could be enforced. I looked away toward the window where a squirrel was darting across the sidewalk with something shiny in its mouth. Nathan had taken and taken and taken all while telling me there was nothing left. All while standing beside Jessica in my dining room, measuring where their new coffee station would go. "What are my options?" I asked. Douglas didn't blink. "You can demand repayment. You can restructure the loan terms. Or if you want to make a point, you can bring it to court. His debt isn't tied to his inheritance. It's tied to the company, which is now yours." I sat with that for a while. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity, out of the need to remember that I was not the foolish old woman they thought they could walk over. I was the silent majority owner of the business that they thought didn't exist. And Nathan owed me more than just an apology. He owed me nearly 6 figures in paper in principle, and in the arrogance of believing I wouldn't know the difference. That evening I made dinner for one. It wasn't fancy. A little pasta, some sautéed spinach. I ate at the breakfast nook looking out into the overgrown garden where Sam used to keep his sunflowers tall and proud. A few brave stalks were still standing. The phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail again. "Jessica. Eleanor. We've confirmed the photographer for Friday. Please make sure the living room is staged appropriately. We want warm tones, clean lines, minimal clutter." I turned off the phone. And then for the first time in over a week, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I realized something. They were decorating a future that didn't belong to them. They were building on land that had never truly been theirs. They thought I was clearing out, but I was only just getting started. The next morning, I drove to the construction company's office, a modest brick building at the edge of the industrial park on Hawthorne Avenue. It looked exactly like Sam, no show, no flash, just function and quiet capability. Erin McIntyre met me at the door, tall, sharp eyes, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Reed," she asked. "Eleanor, please." She extended her hand. "It's an honor to meet you. Sam spoke about you often." I blinked. "He did?" Erin nodded. Always with that kind of soft pride people get when they know they married better than they deserved. That almost broke me. But I didn't let it. We sat in the small conference room with blueprints pinned to the wall and a half-empty pot of coffee quietly steaming beside us. "I understand you've been running day-to-day operations," I said. "Yes, Sam handled strategy, kept oversight, and signed off on contracts. But the logistics vendor's crew's projections, that's been me for the past 3 years." I nodded. "Would you be willing to continue?" Her eyebrows rose slightly. "That depends. Are you planning to take over?" "Not in person," I said. "But I'd like to remain owner." Quietly. "I want to keep things running exactly as they've been, but with one adjustment. Which is, I want you to know you have my full trust and full authority as long as you keep the books clean and the reputation strong." Erin let out a breath like she'd been holding it for months. "I won't let you down," she said. "Sam never micromanaged. He just asked for honesty." I smiled. "I think we'll get along just fine." 2 hours later, I was back home when Nathan walked in without knocking. Typical. He looked around like a realtor. Again. "Hey, Mom. I saw your car in the driveway and thought I'd swing by to check in." I gave him a neutral nod. "How thoughtful." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, about dinner the other night. Maybe Jess came on a little strong. She's just trying to be helpful, you know. I didn't respond." He continued. "We've been thinking we'd like to meet with the estate attorney soon, just to expedite things. No sense dragging out probate, right? Probate." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. "You think this house goes through probate?" I asked. He blinked. "Well, yeah. Everything does. Dad didn't have a trust or anything, right?" This was the moment. The moment I stopped pretending to be confused. The moment I stepped into the space Sam had quietly prepared for me. There's a trust, I said calmly. Multiple. And the business that's not part of the estate. It's mine. Nathan froze. What business? I reached for the folder I'd left on the counter. The one you borrowed $95,000 from. He went pale. What are you talking about? I laid the paperwork out in front of him. 1, 2, 3. Clear as sunlight. Every missed payment. Every signature. Every lie he had told. Mom, he started. This can't be right. Oh, it's right, I said. And it's enforceable. He backed away like the kitchen floor had shifted. I never thought you'd do this, he whispered. Not to your son. I met his gaze for the first time in days. You never thought I'd know how. Nathan didn't slam the door when he left. He didn't have to. The silence he left behind was louder than anything he could have shouted. The kind that settles like dust in the corners, reminding you that something just broke, not loudly, but permanently. I stood alone in the kitchen, my hand still resting on the back of the chair he had just vacated. The same chair he used to climb onto when he was 5, pretending he was a pirate captain with a spoon for a sword. Back when he still looked at me with wonder. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. And that hurt more than any signature on a betrayal. But something else was growing now, a quiet fire where the ache had been. The next morning, I pulled out the folder Sam once labeled, "In Case." I placed it on the dining table, the same one Jessica had casually said they'd replace with a modern piece, and reviewed every document again. Title deeds, trusts, a letter from the law firm. He hadn't left me hope. He'd left me infrastructure. At 10 a.m., I stepped into the law office on Mulberry Street, a modest building with ivy curling around the doorway. Callie Green, the young associate who had taken over Sam's legal matters, greeted me like she'd been expecting this day. "Mrs. Reed," she said kindly. "I'm glad you came." I sat down, fingers folded tightly in my lap. I need to understand everything he set up. No room for assumption. No room for Nathan to twist it. She smiled with something like admiration. Sam Reed didn't leave much to chance. She pulled out a set of neatly labeled folders and walked me through it all 3 years before his death. Sam had quietly transferred the deed of our home into a survivorship trust, making me the sole beneficiary upon his passing. The trust was shielded clean and unchallengeable. It means the house passed directly to you, Callie explained. It was never part of the estate. It doesn't go through probate. No one else, not Nathan, not anyone has any legal claim to it. I sat still for a long moment, breathing in the weight of what that meant. It's mine, I whispered. Yes, Callie nodded. It always was. But now it's official. Something shifted in my posture. I hadn't realized how much I'd been bracing myself for a fight for judgment, for another moment of being talked over. But now, there was clarity. Not triumph, not yet. But the ground beneath my feet. As I stood to leave, Callie placed a small envelope into my hand. Your husband also left a personal letter for you. We were instructed to hand it over only when this part was discussed. The envelope was cream-colored. On the back, in Sam's handwriting, 3 words, just in case. I didn't open it right away. They came that afternoon. Nathan rang the bell once, performative courtesy, and Jessica let herself in without waiting. She smelled like expensive perfume and entitlement. I was already in the sunroom, the room Sam loved most. It was where he read his mystery novels, always folding the corner of the page instead of using a bookmark, even though I scolded him for it. Jessica strutted in like she already owned the walls. We've confirmed the photographer for Friday, she announced. Please have the personal items packed away by then. We want neutral energy for the listing. I tilted my head. Neutral. Yes, she said, glancing around with distaste. This space feels dated, all the doilies, and this yellow lamp. Honestly, Eleanor buyers prefer minimalism. I didn't respond. Nathan cleared his throat. It's just staging, Mom. You don't have to take it personally. Once escrow closes— Escrow, I interrupted. Jessica blinked. Yes, well, obviously we'll handle the sale paperwork and— There won't be a sale, I said, rising. Nathan frowned. Mom? There won't be a sale, I repeated firmer this time. I walked over to the secretary's desk and pulled out the folder Callie had given me. I laid it on the coffee table between us. What's that? Jessica asked. The truth, I said. She hesitated, but Nathan picked it up. His eyes darted over the pages, legal language, notarized forms, Sam's signature trust diagrams. His lips parted, but no words came out. Jessica snatched the folder. This can't be right. Houses don't just skip probate. They do, I said, when someone plans carefully. When someone doesn't want his wife thrown out of her home a week after his funeral. You're doing this out of spite, Jessica spat. No, I'm doing this because this is my house. Legally, ethically, entirely. Nathan finally spoke. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I looked directly at him. Because I wanted to see what you would do. Jessica stepped back like she'd been slapped. Let me be clear, I said quietly. You don't live here. You don't get to photograph this home. You don't get to stage my memories or sell what isn't yours. If you try, my lawyer is ready. Jessica's face twisted. I should have known. He always protected you. Yes, I said. Because he knew who would try to take advantage of the moment he couldn't speak for himself. She turned to Nathan. Say something. Nathan swallowed. She's right. And that tiny, hushed acknowledgement broke whatever thread Jessica was hanging onto. She stormed out without another word. Nathan lingered. I didn't know about the trust, he murmured. No, I said. But you knew who I was. And you chose not to see me. He left quietly. That evening, I sat in the living room alone and finally opened Sam's letter. Elle, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if you're reading this today, I suspect you've had a visit from Nathan and Jessica. I know them. And I know you. You always gave too much grace. That's why I had to plan. Don't let sentiment rob you of what you've built. This house is yours. The company is yours. You don't owe them what they think. You owe yourself peace. Love always. Sam. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I folded the letter and slipped it into the back of my recipe book behind the page for his favorite peach cobbler. 3 days later, I found something else. Hidden in the back of Sam's desk drawer, a leather-bound notebook, the kind he used for jotting numbers and lists. Tucked between faded notes about plumbing estimates and lumber orders was a page dated nearly 6 years ago. Jessica. Watch spending. Distrustful of shared assets. Keeps Nathan separated from us. Worrisome. Below it underlined twice. Set up a separate contingency. Eleanor needs protection even from family. I stared at those words for a long time. Sam had seen this coming. Not just the legal side, the emotional fracture, the loyalty erosion, the reality of what people become when they smell inheritance. He hadn't waited for betrayal to act. He had responded to character, not catastrophe. And now I was standing on the foundation he had poured quietly, brick by quiet brick. Later that evening, I poured myself a cup of tea, walked out to the back porch, and sat beneath the string lights Sam had installed himself years ago. The sky was purple and gold, streaked with memories. I pulled out a pen and a sheet of thick stationery. Not to respond to Nathan, not to write Sam. I wrote to myself. Dear Eleanor, the version of you who stayed silent at the dinner table. The version who flinched when Jessica raised her voice. The version that thought loyalty would eventually be rewarded. You were good, but now you are also wise. And they don't know how dangerous that combination can be. Keep going, love me. The next morning I taped a new note on the refrigerator. No showings, no transfers. This house is no longer up for discussion. Under it, I pinned a photo of Sam holding a coffee cup and smirking at the camera like he knew something no one else did. Because he did. And now so did I. The kitchen felt different that morning. It wasn't quieter, it had always been quiet since Sam passed, but it was clearer. as if every object had a defined place again. Even the kettle resting beside the stove looked as though it belonged to someone who had decided to stay. I poured my tea and sat down at the table. Sam's folder opened in front of me, the documents laid out like puzzle pieces waiting to form the bigger picture. At the very bottom was a single line Sam had written in his usual blocky handwriting: C. Morrison and Associates. Business Filings Trust Flow. I knew the name. Margaret Morrison had been Sam's accountant for over a decade. I had met her once briefly at the company's 10th anniversary picnic. She was polite professional and had brought a pineapple upside-down cake that Jessica loudly declared from a mix. I called that morning. When I told the receptionist who I was, there was a pause. Then Mrs. Reed, Ms. Morrison is expecting you. Another one of Sam's quiet arrangements. The office was on the edge of town, not flashy but efficient. Inside, everything smelled like toner and fresh coffee. Margaret Morrison greeted me personally, her gray hair pinned neatly and a worn leather ledger tucked under one arm. "Eleanor," she said warmly, "I'm so sorry about Sam. He was one of the most meticulous clients I've ever had." I smiled, grateful for the calm in her voice. "Thank you. And I have a feeling his meticulousness is about to become very useful." She led me into a private office and spread out several files. "Your husband restructured the business 5 years ago. Transferred ownership into a trust. You're the sole beneficiary. He handled it all quietly but by the book. Since then, the business has continued generating revenue, substantial revenue." She slid over the latest profit and loss statements. The numbers made my breath hitch. This is more than I expected," I murmured. Margaret nodded. Sam moved away from big commercial projects and focused on reliable small builds, mostly community contracts, steady income, lower risk. He was smart. I looked at the statements again, columns of income, modest expenses, and regular transfers. But something caught my eye. A recurring name. Bradley Construction Management. "Tom Bradley," Margaret explained. "He's been your site foreman and unofficial project manager since the restructuring. Sam trusted him completely. Tom's been keeping the business running these last few months." "I'd like to meet him," I said. "You should," she replied. "He's been asking about you, worried what would happen to the company." Before we could continue, I noticed another tab on the report. "Loans. May I asked. She handed over the folder, watching my expression carefully. My heart sank as I read the first page. "To Wade Reed, from Henderson Construction Trust. Date March 12th. Amount $15,000. Purpose startup investment, online retail." Another page, and another. Each one was signed by both Sam and Wade. Dozens of them. 5 years' worth of investments, consulting grants, and emergency liquidity. Each one masked as opportunity, and almost none of them repaid. "Total outstanding," I whispered, flipping to the last page. $94,600. $96,000 with interest," Margaret corrected gently. I closed the folder. "He said Sam left us nothing but debt." She shook her head. "The debt is Wade's, not yours. And he never made payments." She hesitated. "No, Sam never enforced them. He treated them like business loans on paper, but family obligations in practice." I sat back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. So he played the struggling son, took thousands, and then tried to take the house and the company too. Margaret nodded quietly. "Wade came by last week, said he'd be managing business affairs from now on, asked me to begin preparing transfer documents." My jaw tightened. "Did he have any authorization?" "No. I refused until hearing from you." "Thank you," I said. She leaned forward. "You still have full control, Eleanor. Over the business, the records, the assets, everything." I took a slow breath. "I want to meet Tom," I said again. "Today, if possible. I'll call him right now." Tom Bradley looked older than I remembered, but not weaker. He arrived that afternoon in work boots and a collared shirt faded from sun and sawdust. "Mrs. Reed," he said, gripping my hand firmly. It's an honor. I gestured to the chair opposite mine at the dining table. Thank you for keeping everything steady. He nodded, sitting carefully. Sam told me to be ready, that if anything happened, you'd be the one making decisions, not Wade. I felt something shift inside me, not shock, not even anger anymore, just clarity. I saw the loan records, I said. Tom exhaled through his nose. Yeah, Sam wanted to help him, but he also knew it was dangerous. He never told me. He didn't want you to worry. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Tom pulled out a small black notebook, a mirror to Sam's. I started keeping this when Sam got sick, just to keep track of what we discussed. He flipped to a bookmarked page and read aloud, "If Wade tries to take the business, do not turn over access until Eleanor gives written instructions." And then another line, "Tell her I believed in her. She just never believed it herself." I turned away to hide the emotion crawling up my throat. The next few days were a quiet storm. I sat with Margaret and Tom and went through every contract, every invoice, every project pipeline. I updated the signatures on the accounts, filed new documents affirming ownership. And I did one more thing. I wrote a formal notice of debt collection to Wade for the full $96,000. It wasn't vindictive. It was a matter of record. The envelope was thick, firm, and sealed with legal weight. Margaret offered to send it via certified mail. I declined. "I'll deliver it myself." They didn't answer the door the first time I knocked. But on the second, Jessica opened it with a tight smile and a baby blue silk robe that clung too perfectly for loungewear. "Eleanor," she said. "What a surprise." "Not really," I replied. "Is Wade home?" He appeared behind her, hair damp, voice flat. "What do you want?" I held out the envelope. "Consider this formal notice." Jessica reached for it, but I pulled back. "This is for Wade." He took it reluctantly and opened it with all the confidence of a man who thinks consequences are for other people. When he saw the total, his face went pale. "This isn't fair. It's overdue. I'm your son, and you treated me like a tenant you could evict." Jessica scoffed. "You're just trying to punish us now." I held her gaze. "No. I'm teaching you what Sam taught me. Protection is love in advance, and consequences are love's twin." I turned to leave but paused at the steps. "Oh, and one more thing," I said without looking back. "If you miss a payment, I'll have no choice but to garnish your wages." Then I walked away, and I didn't flinch when I heard the door slam behind me. That evening I opened a new notebook, not a ledger, a journal. Today I became the executor of my own life, not in Sam's memory, not one of Wade's mistakes, mine. I own something now, not just property. I own peace. I own knowing. I own the silence that follows truth, not the silence that follows being ignored. The letter arrived just as I was watering the rose bushes Sam planted on our 30th anniversary. I recognized the logo embossed on the envelope before I even slid it open: Henderson and Lowell, PLLC. A boutique firm, loud in reputation, if not in size, the kind Jessica once bragged her Pilates client used for a real estate feud. Inside, the tone was brisk. "Our clients, Mr. Wade Reed and Mrs. Jessica Reed, wish to formally contest the assignment of ownership over Henderson Construction. Furthermore, they challenge the legitimacy of any debt claims asserted by Eleanor Reed against Mr. Wade Reed, citing a lack of contractual enforcement and familial context." I reread the last line twice: familial context. As if the years of silence, avoidance, and manipulation could be boiled down to a misunderstanding between kin. The letter ended with a threat. If I did not respond in 5 business days, they would initiate legal proceedings. I folded it neatly, placed it beside the teacup Sam had used last, and whispered, "They're testing what you built, Sam, but they weren't ready for what you left behind." That afternoon I met with my lawyer, James Whitaker. James looked like the kind of man who ironed his socks and considered silence part of his hourly rate. When I handed him the letter, he read without interruption save for a single blink. "Ambitious," he muttered, "but doomed." Is it? He looked up at me, steepling his fingers. You're the sole legal trustee of the Henderson Family Trust. Every document is clean, witnessed, dated, notarized. If they want a courtroom, they'll be stepping onto a minefield. I sipped the tea he'd offered. They want to scare me. He nodded. But paper doesn't panic. He reached for the folder I'd brought, the one filled with Sam's records, Wade's loans, and 5 years of trust documentation. Have you spoken to them? He asked. No. They made their position clear. And yours? I looked him straight in the eye. Paper speaks louder. James crafted a response not with venom, but with weight. Every clause is precise. Every phrase is a mirror to their accusations, reflecting them with quiet, lawful certainty. We arranged a meeting not at our firm, but at theirs. I want them to see that I'm not hiding behind lawyers, I told James. He didn't argue. Their conference room overlooked a manicured courtyard, all symmetry and silence. Jessica arrived first, overdressed and undercomposed, clicking across the floor like she owned the tiles. Wade trailed behind her, his smile flickering like a faulty bulb. Their attorney, Celine Bishop, was the last to enter. Tailored charcoal blazer, burgundy nails. No notes, just a sleek tablet and eyes that missed nothing. James greeted her with calm professionalism. I gave a nod. Jessica gave none. Celine opened the meeting. Let's keep this respectful. My clients have expressed concern that certain financial decisions made by the deceased were misinterpreted. James slid the first folder across the table. Here are the original trust documents signed and notarized in 2018. And here he placed a second folder beside it, are the loan agreements between Mr. Wade Reed and Henderson Construction Trust. All itemized, all legally enforceable. Jessica's lips pursed. Wade shifted uncomfortably. That was family support. James didn't flinch. Support doesn't come with payment schedules, interest rates, and collateral clauses. Celine studied the documents. I stayed quiet deliberately. I wanted my silence to be louder than their justifications. James leaned in slightly. This isn't about disputes, it's about documents. If your clients wish to proceed to court, we will countersue for malicious litigation and seek repayment of debt in full with penalties. Wade looked stunned. You'd sue your son? I turned to him. You sued me first with this letter. Jessica rolled her eyes. This is ridiculous. You're hiding behind paperwork. Now I spoke. Calm, cold, controlled. No. I'm revealing who you are through it. Celine narrowed her eyes but said nothing. Then James pulled out one last sheet. An email from Wade to Margaret Morrison dated 3 days after Sam's funeral, requesting immediate transfer of the company accounts into his name. Celine paled slightly. You attempted to transfer control before I had even opened my husband's will, I said. Before you even offered condolences. I didn't mean Wade started. You meant to erase me before I could open my mouth. Silence hung heavy. Jessica broke it. Fine. So you have paper. But no judge will side against a grieving son. I let out a soft laugh. You're not grieving Jessica. You're calculating. And for once you underestimated the woman behind the widow. The next day I got a call. From Celine. Privately. Mrs. Reed. She said, her voice more measured, less performative. I hope you don't mind me saying this off the record. I don't, I replied. She hesitated, then continued. Your husband built a solid legal wall around you. But I think you're the real architect. You didn't flinch once. I learned from watching people flinch, I said quietly. There was a pause. I've had clients like you, she admitted. They're the ones you never see coming until you're drowning in certified documents. Is that a compliment? It's the kind I give rarely. Then she added almost grudgingly, I'll advise my clients to withdraw. Do that, I said. And tell them this isn't revenge, it's realignment. The formal withdrawal came 2 days later, short, flat, unapologetic. They acknowledged my role as trustee. They admitted no standing to challenge the ownership. They offered no resistance to the debt claims. James folded it up and smiled. You're done. No, I said, standing at the window. I'm beginning. He raised an eyebrow. Beginning what? I took a long breath. Living not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, but as someone who signs the checks, owns the land, and writes the next chapter. That evening, I found a small, crumpled post-it tucked into the back of Sam's leather-bound notebook. I almost missed it. It read, "She won't need to scream. Her truth will sound like paper sliding across a table." I sat down at his desk, heart still, eyes wet. "You were right, Sam," I whispered. "But I'm louder than even you imagined." The realtor called at exactly 900 a.m., as if time could persuade me. "Mrs. Reed, just following up, should we proceed with staging?" It helps buyers emotionally connect to a space. I looked around the kitchen, still dotted with reminders of a life the ceramic rooster Sam had hated. My faded apron on the hook, a crack in the windowsill that had never been repaired, but always remembered. "This house already has emotions," I said. "They're just not for sale." She hesitated. "I see. Then should we cancel the photos?" I smiled quietly. "No need. There's nothing here for anyone else to see yet." I hung up, and for the first time in weeks, I opened every window in the house. The air that rushed in wasn't fresh. It was familiar, the way grief smells when it stops performing. I started in the hallway. The photo frames that once lined it were already removed, leaving pale rectangles of memory on the paint. Wade had wanted to repaint everything a neutral white. Jessica had suggested mirrors, but I decided to do something else. I sat cross-legged on the hardwood and stared at the wall, not to mourn it, but to remember what had once lived inside those frames. Sam at 27, his arm around my waist after we'd signed the loan for this house. Wade at 5, covered in birthday cake, laughing like the world had no edge. Me, pregnant, uncertain, wearing a red scarf and a smile I barely recognized myself now. I whispered to each rectangle, not words, just presence. Then one by one I wrapped the empty frames in newspaper and placed them in a box labeled ours. Not storage, not trash, just ours. By the afternoon I reached Sam's study. It had been untouched since the legal battle ended. Wade hadn't dared step back inside, and I hadn't had the heart to open the drawers since. But now I did. Every file was labeled in Sam's handwriting, blocky, exact, unafraid. Taxes, deeds, permits, trust updates. But beneath the folders, something caught my eye. A worn manila envelope with no label, no markings, tucked under a pile of unrelated paperwork, as if meant to be hidden in plain sight. I opened it. Inside was a printed letter. Not from a lawyer, not even from Sam. From a woman. "Dear Sam, thank you for your kindness last spring. I don't know what I would have done without your help or your discretion. The boys are adjusting slowly. You gave us more than a roof, you gave me a way back to myself. I'll never forget what you said. Security is love that prepares in advance. With gratitude, Maya." There was no last name, just a first name, and a photocopy of a lease agreement dated 3 years ago. Property, a small duplex in a nearby town. Renter Maya T. Owner Henderson Construction Trust. I sat back stunned. Sam had used part of the trust to house someone, a woman with children. Quietly, without ever telling me. It wasn't betrayal I felt. It was clarity. Sam had been practicing something with her, something he never verbalized to me, but had prepared me for all along. Empowerment in advance. Not just money, not just protection. Designing escape routes for people who didn't even know they needed to run yet. I placed the envelope back in the drawer, not to forget, but to remember. There would be time to follow up to understand the full story. But for now, I had to finish cleaning. The next room was Wade's childhood bedroom. He hadn't touched the posters in years, peeling rock bands, framed football jerseys. In the closet, a pair of old cleats still carried dried mud from his last high school game. I sat on the edge of the bed. It still held the shape of the boy he once was, kind scared giggly at bedtime. I remember one night when he was 10, shaking from a nightmare. I'd crawled in beside him, whispered stories until his breathing evened out. He clutched my hand and said, "Don't ever leave, okay?" And now he'd tried to evict me like I was mold in the corner. I ran my hand across the pillow. Maybe the hardest thing about motherhood is realizing your child's character isn't always your reflection. Sometimes it's your contrast. I stood up, opened his closet, took down every relic not out of spite, but to reclaim space. I packed his trophies and cleats in silence, labeled the box his return. As dusk fell, I lit one of Sam's old cedar candles. The scent filled the air, the same one we'd used during our last Christmas together. I poured a glass of wine, sat in the living room, and stared at the fireplace. I realized something. Then I didn't want to stay in this house. Not because they tried to take it, but because they'd made it feel takeable. What once felt like safety now felt like a burden wrapped in nostalgia. And safety, I'd learned, doesn't live in walls. It lives in what you can walk away from without losing yourself. The next morning I called James. "I've decided," I said. He didn't interrupt. "I'm selling the house. But not to Wade, not to Jessica, and not to anyone who walks through just to flip it." He paused. "Do you have someone in mind?" "Yes," I said. "I want to offer it to a woman like Maya, a mother, starting over, not as a handout but as a chance, the same chance Sam gave me." He was silent for a long time. "Then I'll start drawing up terms." That afternoon I wrote a letter. To no one in particular. Or maybe to myself, the version of me that sat stunned at a dinner table weeks ago, heartbroken and voiceless. You thought silence was dignity. You thought calm meant power. But power is this: knowing what's yours and letting go anyway. Knowing what was never theirs to take and no longer needing to prove it. That night I didn't sleep in the master bedroom. I slept on the floor of the living room, wrapped in the quilt Sam's mother made us. And in the morning, as the sun poured in, I opened the front door wide, not to leave, but to let light touch every part of what remained. I walked from room to room and whispered goodbye. To the creaky stairs that always complained at midnight. To the pantry door that stuck in the summer. To the spot on the wall where Sam had marked Wade's height in pencil. I didn't cry. I simply stood in the center of what used to be ours. And I whispered, "Thank you." Then I whispered, "I'm ready." The sea doesn't shout like the city. It breathes. And for the first time in my adult life, I was breathing with it. The cottage Sam had quietly purchased, tucked between a sleepy beach town and an old lighthouse, was nothing grand. 2 bedrooms, a fireplace that still coughed in the morning's, windows that opened with resistance but stayed open. It was mine. Fully. Irrevocably. No son is waiting with folded arms. No daughter-in-law reminding me of staging value. No paperwork laced with a warning. Just me, and salt air, and silence, the good kind. I moved in with nothing more than 4 boxes, a few books, and a single letter opener shaped like a heron. Sam had bought the place 3 years ago under the trust's name and left no instructions, just a scribbled note Margaret Morrison found tucked in a deed folder for when she's ready, for heir that doesn't carry expectation. I don't remember crying when I read it, but I remember sitting very still. Because how do you grieve a man who understood what you'd need before you even knew you'd need it? The first week in the cottage, I didn't unpack everything. I left the bedroom half empty, the shelves mostly bare. I wanted to see what the space asked for before I filled it. That was new for me, not rushing to complete things. The kitchen came alive first. A cast iron pan, Sam's old mug with the faded fishing boat, a small spice rack I found at the Sunday market, carved by a woman with fingers more skilled than mine had ever been. I cooked slowly, ate by the window. No one is watching, no one is correcting. And in those quiet meals, something stirred inside me that felt dangerously close to joy. On my 6th morning there, I received a phone call. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. Mrs. Reed. The voice was young, female, and nervous. "My name is Linda Morrison, Margaret's daughter." I remembered Margaret speaking of her. "A nurse. Kind. Sharp. I hope I'm not intruding, she said. I heard, well, I know some of what happened. My mom didn't say much, just that you handled something most women never prepare for, and you handled it without theatrics. I handled it with a lot of legal folders, I said, half smiling. She laughed, then hesitated. I run a support group, unofficial for now, but growing. Women like me and well, like you. Women who've been dismissed, written out, or cornered by the people closest to them. I said nothing, but I listened. I was wondering, she continued, if you might be willing to talk. Not publicly, just to the group. Share how you navigated it all. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at the ocean. Share the story. A part of me recoiled, not from fear, but from the intimacy of it. I hadn't spoken out loud about Wade in weeks, hadn't said his name in full. I'd labeled his box "Return to Sender" and let the silence replace the hurt. I'll think about it, I said softly, and I meant it. That evening I went through the last of the files I'd brought with me. Nestled between Sam's banking folders and personal letters was something I hadn't noticed before. A sheet of paper titled, "If You Ever Feel Like You Don't Know Who You Are Anymore." It wasn't addressed, it wasn't signed, but it was Sam's handwriting. Start with the small things, Ellie. The breakfast you like when no one's watching. The books you reread without guilt. The sound you let play when the house is yours alone. Then build from there. You are not lost. You're just unasked for. And now finally, you can ask yourself. I set the paper down and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since Asheville. The next morning I made cinnamon toast, the kind Wade used to call boring. I read a gardening mystery novel I'd hidden from Sam because he said the plot was predictable, and I played Billie Holiday on repeat. By noon I was dancing. Not well, but without apology. That afternoon I called Linda back. "Will it be in person?" I asked. She paused. "It can be, or virtual, or even anonymous." "No," I said. "If I do this, I want to see their faces." 1 week later, I drove 2 hours to a converted church hall where 23 women sat in a circle of folding chairs. The youngest looked barely 30. The oldest, maybe older than me. Some clutched notebooks. Others just held each other's gaze. Linda introduced me briefly. "She's not here to give answers. She's here to share a path." Then she stepped back. And I stepped forward. I didn't start with the betrayal. I started with the potatoes. The night Wade asked for the salt and didn't look me in the eyes. The weight of the chair that Sam no longer occupied. The moment I realized I wasn't part of their version of family anymore, I was a footnote. Then I walked them through the bank meeting. The trust, the debt, the power of documents that whispered "you matter." No dramatics, no condemnation, just facts. And the soft sound of other women nodding because they'd seen their own stories hiding inside mine. Afterward, a woman approached me. Her name was Carolyn. Her son had stolen her retirement to fund a second restaurant that failed within months. He blamed her for the failure. She never pressed charges. She didn't want to lose him. He already left, I said. The theft just made it real. She started crying, but when she hugged me, she didn't feel broken. She felt released. Linda emailed me the next morning. "They want you back. They want to name the series after you. Letters from Eleanor. Would you consider writing something regular for them? We can keep it private if you like. Or public if you're ready." I wasn't sure. But I sat at my new desk, opened a fresh notebook, and wrote the title, "The First Time I Said No and Meant It." Underneath, I wrote the first line. It wasn't to my husband. It wasn't for my son. It was to the version of me that stayed silent to keep the peace. That night, I stood on the porch with a blanket draped around my shoulders. The ocean wasn't wild. It was rhythmic, steady. A voice beside me would have said, "See, this is what I wanted for you." But I didn't need to imagine Sam's voice anymore, because I had found my own. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, just Wade's slanted handwriting The same uneven scrawl he'd used on Mother's Day cards when he was little, back when love came easier than explanations. I knew what was inside before I opened it. An apology. They always come eventually, not because they're ready, but because you've stopped needing them. Still, I held the envelope for hours. I placed it on the mantel, then the coffee table, then the arm of the reading chair where I didn't sit that day. At sunset, I poured a glass of wine and finally opened it. No fanfare, no build-up, just a quiet tear at the seal, like undoing a stitch you once trusted to hold. Mom, I know I don't deserve this chance and maybe it's too late, but I wanted to try anyway. I was wrong. Not just about the money or the business. I was wrong about you. About everything you did that I didn't see or chose not to. When Dad died, I panicked. Not because I lost him, but because I lost the safety of not having to be responsible. And I thought taking the house, taking control would make me feel steady. But all I did was steal from the one person who had always been there. I've started therapy. Jessica and I are trying to rebuild. I'm working 2 jobs to repay what I owe. But I know that doesn't erase what happened. If you can ever find a way to forgive me, I'd like to try again. As your son, not as your heir. Love, Wade. I read it once, then again, then once more, out loud. The words were sincere, but they weren't mine to carry anymore. Forgiveness is a strange currency. People think offering it gives you peace. But sometimes the greatest peace is realizing you don't need to transact at all. I didn't write back right away. Instead, I went for a walk along the shore. The wind was sharp that evening, and the sea was louder than usual, not angry, just restless. I walked until my legs ached, until the salt air dried the wetness I didn't know was clinging to my lashes. Then I sat on a driftwood log, shoes off toes, digging into the cold sand. That's when the memory came. Wade was 11. He'd forgotten his lunch on a Tuesday, always Tuesday, and I drove across town to drop it off at school. When I arrived, he was already in the cafeteria sitting with friends. I waited by the double doors, watching him laugh, cheeks full, eyes bright. When he finally saw me, he didn't wave. He didn't smile. He walked over, grabbed the bag from my hands, and muttered, "You didn't have to come," then turned around. No thank you, no acknowledgement, just embarrassment that I had shown up. That moment, small, forgettable, had tattooed itself somewhere under my ribs, and I realized something. I had been saying you didn't have to come to me ever since. Back at the cottage, I lit a candle. The kind Sam hated because it smelled like vanilla cake, too sweet. He said like a bakery exploded. I let it burn. Then I wrote a letter, not for Wade, for myself. Dear Eleanor, you showed up when no one saw it, when no one thanked you. You showed up when it cost you your voice, your rest, your place at the table. You carried the lunch, you carried the house, you carried the silence, and now you carry nothing. Because you finally know not every child remains your child. Not every wound needs tending. Some are just there to remind you what not to walk into again. You are not cruel for stepping away. You are not bitter for choosing air over an apology. You are not lesser because your motherhood ended before your love did. You are free. And that is enough. I folded it and placed it in my journal. That would be my answer. But I did write one thing to Wade. 3 sentences, one truth. Wade, thank you for your letter. I hope you find the healing you need. But I no longer belong in the part of your life where explanations are required. I didn't sign it with Mom. I didn't sign it with love. I simply signed it Eleanor. The next day, Linda called. How are you? She asked. I paused. Lighter. There was something in her voice, tentative, searching. We're starting a new chapter in the group, she said. Not just stories of survival. But after. What does it mean to exist beyond apology? Would you consider leading it? I stared out at the ocean. Its waves didn't pause to be appreciated. They just kept moving forward. I'll think about it, I said. And I smiled. Because this time I meant it. That evening I poured a glass of wine and walked to the beach barefoot. The sand was colder than I liked. The wind pulled at my cardigan, but I stayed. There was a power in sitting with discomfort and knowing you could leave at any moment and choosing to stay anyway. Just like there was power in receiving a letter, reading it, honoring it, and not folding yourself to fit inside it. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not always a door. Sometimes it's a window you leave open long enough to prove the air won't kill you. And then you close it, not with malice, but with grace, because you have nothing left to prove, and everything is left to live. They introduced me as a woman who found her voice through silence. I stood backstage behind a heavy velvet curtain, hands folded over each other like I'd been in church. Only this time, I wasn't preparing to pray. I was preparing to speak. For the first time publicly, under my real name. No pen name, no pseudonym, no safe screen between me and the world, just Eleanor Reed. Linda's event had started as a support circle, but now it had grown into something bigger, a summit almost. A gathering of women who had survived, rebuilt, and reimagined. The theme this year was simple: whose name is on the door metaphorically, legally, emotionally. A question too many women never got to answer for themselves. There were 143 chairs filled that afternoon. Women daughters, some sons, even a few husbands who finally came to listen. Linda took the stage first, radiant in her confidence. Then came survivors of medical abuse, emotional coercion, and financial manipulation. Then, me. I stepped out in flats, a blue silk blouse, hair pulled back, no pearls, no apologies. The lights were warm, the audience quiet, ready. I stood there for a moment before speaking, letting them look, letting myself be seen. Then I began. Good afternoon. My name is Eleanor Reed. Some of you know my story or think you do. You've read the headlines, the blog posts, maybe the summary. Widow left homeless by her son fights back and wins everything. But that's not the real story. The real story started long before I lost my house. It started the day I stopped being asked what I wanted. The day I began to shrink my voice to keep the peace. The day I was told, "You're overreacting, you're emotional, you're just tired." And I believed them. For years, I believed that silence was strength, that endurance was love, that motherhood meant erasure. Until I buried a man who had quietly built my safety while the rest of the world assumed I didn't need it. And suddenly I realized the only thing more terrifying than being alone. I was realizing I'd always been. A pause, a breath, the kind of silence you choose. When my son and his wife told me to grieve and leave in the same breath, I did what they never expected. I left. But I didn't leave empty-handed. I left with paperwork. I left with questions. And I left with the realization that I had been living in a home, not a life. And when I opened those drawers, those documents, those quiet safeguards Sam had tucked into every corner of our financial life, I realized this. I had been protected by a man, but I had never been taught to protect myself. That ends now. The room was still. A few heads nodded. One woman in the back clutched her notebook like it was holy. I stepped forward. Today I don't stand here as a cautionary tale. I stand here as a reminder inheritance is not always money. Sometimes it's the courage to say no more. Sometimes it's the decision to send back the guilt that was never yours. Sometimes it's a blank page you claim with your name, not the one tied to someone else's approval. I am not angry. I am not bitter. I am finally unobligated. And if any part of this story sounds like your own, then please know you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your seat at the table, especially if they've pushed your chair to the corner. And you certainly don't owe anyone your legacy just because they share your blood. Applause. Not explosive, but building. Real. I let it settle. Then the final offering. My name is Eleanor Reed, and this time, no one else is writing my ending. I live by the sea. I run a small support circle now with Linda. I garden. I cook badly. I read mystery novels Sam would have mocked. And every week I open my inbox to messages from women like you, stories that begin with heartbreak but don't end there. If you're watching this online, maybe in your kitchen, in your car, with tears you don't understand. Yet I want you to do something. Comment on where you're watching from. Tell me one thing you reclaimed. A coffee mug, a habit, a room, a moment you said no and meant it. And if you've never said it yet, start here. Say it below. Not just for me, for you. For the version of you still whispering, is it okay to want more? Yes, it is. The lights dimmed. The applause grew, but I didn't cry. I didn't smile big. I just stood there in full possession of myself. Later that night, I uploaded the full speech to a quiet little YouTube channel Linda helped me create. We titled it, My Name is Eleanor. Within 12 hours, there were 6,000 views. Within a day, 20,000. The comments began pouring in. I just left a 12-year marriage where I was told I had no head for money. I cried when you said unobligated. That's exactly how I want to feel someday. Thank you for speaking. I'm watching from Des Moines. My name is Grace, and I'm finally moving out this weekend. And then one that stopped me mid-scroll, I'm Wade. Not your Wade, but someone else's. And I'm trying to learn what a real apology looks like. Thank you for showing me the other side. I sat back, tears slipping quietly warmly. Not from pain, from connection, from knowing I am not alone. I was never the only Eleanor. I was just one of the first to say it out loud. So if you're reading this, watching this, or maybe just feeling this, comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you're reclaiming. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Share this with a woman you love. Let this story remind you. Freedom doesn't ask for permission. It begins the moment you stop asking if you deserve it.